esse sempre vai ser o mais clássico dos Portal.
In this place, it must be a slow week.
Mano, a bola bugou.
For that is all time is, a red fox amidst a vast color of shining turquoise. How can mirrors be real if our eyes aren't real? Who are we to be the kings? Or if we are truly worthy to be called lizard, I believe it is only right that we be trod upon. They shall reign somewhere, and there is a man sprawled across a plateau. We deserve as we journey there is a day and as today turns into night. You reflect the agenda memory afar off. The sun through the clouds, turning to the understood. It says to climb.
Eu não lembro porque que eu tinha medo dessa parte que é mó calma. Só porque é associado àquele número.
Gains his conscience and returns to help. I like how Linguini initially thinks Remy has stolen food and run off, only to find him innocently cooking an omelet. The fact that they come into conflict with each other and don't trust each other at first makes their relationship feel more real.
Então hoje eu vou começar esse jogo aqui, The Beginner's Guide. Vou ter que ajustar como ele deve aparecer no OBS. Mas esse jogo eu acho que é parecido com um minimod, tipo, na verdade uma correção de mapa que teve do Portal 2, que era tipo, era tudo Liminal Space. Cadê? Deixa eu ver, tem? Não. Tá. No mouse.
Hi there. Thank you very much for playing The Beginner's Guide. My name is Davey Reedon. I wrote The Stanley Parable, and while that game tells a pretty absurd story, today I'm going to tell you about a series of events that happened between 2008 and 2011. We're going to look at the games made by a friend of mine named Coda. Now, these games mean a lot to me. I met Coda in early 2009 at a time when I was really struggling with some personal stuff, and his work pointed me in a very powerful direction. I found it to be a good reference point for the kinds of creative works that I wanted to make. To start you off, this is, I think, the first game he ever made. It's a level for Counter-Strike. You can walk around here, by the way. And mostly it's just Coda learning the basics of building a 3D environment. But what I like is that even though he starts from the simple aesthetic of a desert town, he then scatters these colorful abstract blobs and impossible floating crates around the level. And of course, it destroys the illusion that this actually is a desert town, and instead this level becomes a kind of calling card from its creator. It's like a reminder that this video game was constructed by a real person. And it kind of makes you wonder, what was going through his head as he was building this? This is what I like about all of Coda's games. I mean, not that they're all fascinating as games, but that they are all going to give us access to their creator. I want us to see past the games themselves. WREDEN@gmail.com. Okay, that's about it for introduction. Let's take a look at Coda's first proper game. As each game is loading, I'll show you the date that it was completed. This first one was made in November 2008.
Eu não gosto do narrador falar tanto assim, eu prefiro eu mesmo experienciar sozinho as coisas. Os ambientes. Tipo, essa primeira só se olhar pra trás parece que é tipo anti-chamber. Arma sem barulho. É pior que tem sim, isso
This
tá
game is called
extremamente
Escape
baixo.
from Whisper, and it's one of the more generic games you'll see from Coda.
Okay.
And for what they're not.
Enemy force neutralized. Begin ship evacuation.
I love how you can see the bottom of the universe from this room.
Ah, velho, eu não queria. Eu quero mesmo pensar as coisas, não quero ser lendo o meu pensamento, velho. O que me incomoda é que a FOV desse jogo tá tipo em 70.
Apparently, this space station has a labyrinth on it. Sure, I don't know. There's really no reason for it that I've ever been able to discern, so in the interest of time, I'm just gonna skip you on past it.
É, isso, tá, esse jogo é idêntico ao trem do Portal 2, ou melhor, o negócio do Portal 2 é idêntico a esse jogo.
The beam causes you to start floating. And this is an important moment for him. Because yes, this is technically a glitch, but Coda identifies something human about it, like how small it makes you feel in the face of this larger chaotic system. Or this floating could be the afterlife, a peaceful place, juxtaposed against all of the hysteria that you've just had to traverse. I don't even know. I have no idea what he was thinking, but what's clear is that after making this, something lodges itself in his brain. He wants to do more of these really weird and experimental designs. So he stops work on this and moves on to a stream of tiny little games that go in all sorts of directions. Let's go ahead and take a look at the first game he made after leaving this one behind. Yep, in this game you can only walk backwards.
Ah, achei que meu teclado que tava quebrado. Sabe se...
So it's a short and relatively minimalist experiment combining motion and narrative. It is less advanced than the previous game, but actually it seems to be more focused, more complete. Coda's trying to give it a unique voice rather than simply basing it on a pre-existing trope.
Pior que esse conceito é bem interessante. Imagina ter um jogo de terror que é assim, velho.
I'm modifying the game here so that when you press enter, it'll bring you back up to full speed so you can enter the door for yourself.
Calma. Eu te dar. Ah, velho.
A room that's warm and nice and filled with little ideas for games. Coda would often tell me that he didn't mind if people thought of him as cold or distant. He said that he knew that he was actually a vibrant and compassionate person, but that it takes time to really see that. It can be a very slow climb to get there. Well, this is new for Coda. It's an actual puzzle. Go ahead and see if you can solve it.
Puzzle.
Don't forget that solution, because we're going to see this puzzle again soon.
Ah, vai se
We're gonna see it a
fuder, né?
lot.
Mas não quero que você me fale a resposta, né, animal? Porra.
That seems to be it, right? You walk down a corridor, you solve a puzzle, you get to the end. Simple enough. All right, now I'm going to modify the game again so that when you press enter, it'll remove all of the walls from this room. How about that? There was more to it than we had any way of knowing. I actually find it funny that this game comes after the Stairs game, since they essentially convey the opposite idea. So, in the Stairs game, a dull exterior concealed a rich interior. And then, in this level, a dull interior hides this fantastic outer world. Either way, I think that the point is the same, is that most of the time you don't get to know what you're missing, or even that you're missing anything. That's not your role as a player. So if your role here is not to understand, then what is it? To make all of these games, Coda is using an engine called Source. Like all engines, Source has certain things that it does well, and it has certain things that it does poorly. One of the things that it does very well is boxy linear corridors. That's why so many of Coda's games are set in these large, flat, empty rooms, is just because he's working with what the engine does well. The tools available to the creator shape what kinds of creative work they're going to end up making. You might consider paying attention to the architecture in Coda's games, to notice how they seem to stem from an engine that's very good at producing linear, boxy corridors.
Source. O Hammer é uma ferramenta muito ruim, digamos assim.
The doors stayed shut for a full hour before letting you go. If you don't mind, I think we're gonna skip that. This is something that he and I used to argue about a lot. You know, whether a game ought to actually be playable, whether it means anything if no one can get through it. And I would always defend that, you know, all this work goes into the game, why not make it playable and accessible? And so we just got into heated arguments over it, and there was one time that after one of these conversations, he went home, and a day or two later, he sent me a zip file entitled Playable Games that was full of hundreds of individual games, each of which was just an empty box that you walked around in and nothing else. Believe me, I played every single one of those just to find out if there was like a gag hidden somewhere. There wasn't.
Que doente. O que eu tô percebendo é que quase todo mapa tem esses 3 pontos aqui. É tipo, parece ser uma assinatura dele. Eu não sei se ele significa outra coisa.
And so we make one last descent down to the final floor of the level.
Mano, isso é muito
It's a
lindo.
lamppost. Okay, I can't. So first off, I'm sure you can deduce this, but this game is not connected to the internet. All of the notes that you're gonna see have been written by Coda. This was actually the first game of his that I ever
Whoa.
played. This was shortly after I met him at a weekend game jam in Sacramento, where I grew up. I saw him working on this
Exatamente.
very level, and it was just so different from anything that anyone else was doing. So right away I was like, I have to be friends with this person. In retrospect, I think I was probably a bit too pushy, trying to get his attention. I was over-enthusiastic. But he was very gracious about it and very patient with me. And I cooled off eventually.
Mas esse cara sabe muito bem fazer mapa gigante, velho. Deve demorar muito pra comprovar isso aqui, velho.
And because there's this dark area between the doors, a space between spaces, before you move on, you get to pause. Just for a moment, a few seconds to reflect on and let go of the events that led you here. To step back and connect the pieces together. To grasp at that elusive bigger picture.
Cara, calma, velho.
There's a bit more to this one, but still it's not really communicating anything. It's kind of just weird for weirdness' sake. So okay,
No,
he throws it out and starts
dar
over.
screenshot.
This time he comes at the prison idea from a different direction.
Olha esse reflexo.
Here's a version where there are no bars, but you can't actually get to the well. And then a version where the inside of the prison is the outside and the outside is the inside. Let me just blink you real quick through a few more of these. I mean, he really unloaded on this prison idea. There's nearly a dozen of them. Personally, I think it's awful to watch this, to see a person basically unraveling through their work. And for what? Like, at what point do you just go, maybe there are game ideas other than this prison that I could be working on? But Coda doesn't have that voice telling you to stop. That particular...
Sabe o que isso me lembra? A Maietm do Portal 2. Tipo, isso seria um conceito idêntico que eu vi. Tipo, imagina você só conectar tipo, mais um pedaço naquele jogo que é essa prisão aqui, tá ligado? Ele tem esse tanto de coisa diferente dela. É um conceito da hora.
You'll notice that the quality of the art is a step up from previous games, including this new and improved chat system, which he started using from this point on. From here on out, he begins putting much more effort into the visual polish of his work, and this particular game took 2 months to create as a result.
Mano, e esses modelos de cama aqui, velho? De onde será que eles pegaram esses modelos aqui? Ou será que eles criaram mesmo, né?
After the intense set of prison games, this house cleaning level almost feels like cleansing. It's the moment after a particularly difficult or traumatic experience where you just need to let it sit and digest inside of you, and eventually cohere into something meaningful. I know that Coda really liked this game. Of all of his work, actually, this was the only one that he called me up to ask me to come over and look at it. This was during a period of a few months where he was like grossly happy all the time, just walked around with a constant smile on his face.
É, o cara criou a própria mulher.
I'm glad he made this. I'm glad he found some peace. But, of course, it can't last. The music stops, your companion is gone, it's time to leave. The door at the top of the hill is now open as well. Again, you can't stay in the dark space for too long. You just can't. You have to keep moving. It's how you stay alive.
Pera, eu vou passar pra eu ver um negócio. Tá. É que o texto tinha mudado antes de ser removido. Ele mudava tipo pra versão antiga do texto que ele fazia aqui. É, uma coisa que eu não tô gostando desse narrador, além de eu já não gostar em geral, tipo, é bom ter o comentário dele. Só que tem vezes que ele fala da coisa antes dela acontecer, velho. A coisa tem que acontecer pra você ter sua experiência, aí depois ele vai lá e fala sobre, entendeu? E isso tá complicando as coisas.
About halfway through the game, the perspective shifts. And you play as the teacher. And suddenly, you discover that your teacher is just as bigoted and afraid as you are. Oh, and also you can move around the classroom now.
Bem interessante. Okay.
The game ends with this eerie premonition of what's going to happen next in Coda's life. The solution to social anxiety, to fears of having to perform and having to chase success, the answer for Coda is to withdraw, to hide himself away. Which is what leads to scenarios like the stairs that slowed you down several games ago, where it just becomes harder and harder to access Coda's inner landscape because he keeps retreating. He just keeps backing away from possible connections to anyone other than himself. And to be honest, I didn't consider it very healthy when I first played this game. You know, it looked to me like he was trying to justify the idea of just disconnecting yourself from the world. And that wasn't what I wanted for him or for his games. Because I feel like a lot of his games are inviting me to connect with this person, to bring him closer. But what can you do? After this, Coda went off and took another 5 months to make a new game.
Eu não acho que eu sou muito diferente do que esse criador. Ou que... Eu acho que muita gente é parecido com ele.
It wasn't the guy I knew, it wasn't my friend. I had come to so many conclusions from looking at all of his work up to this point, and then suddenly none of them... I had been trying to, though. That was the thing. For years I was trying to get to know him, to understand who he actually was and what he stood for. I asked him so many times to please just tell me what his games mean to him. I asked him please to tell me what the 3 dots mean.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't.
Também queria saber disso aí.
I just felt so strongly that if I could have connected with him, that if I could have somehow made his work my own, that I would finally be once and for all happy. It was that I needed to see myself in someone else. I needed to be someone other than me. I don't think I ever told you this, but when I took your work and I was showing it to people, it actually felt... It felt as though I were responsible for something important and valuable. And the people who played them, they treated me like I was important. They really listened and cared about what I had to say. Even though I was showing your work, it was... I felt good about myself. Finally. For a moment, while I had that, I liked myself. I think I need to go. And I'm sorry, because I know that I said that I would be here and I would walk you through this, but I'm starting to feel like I have a lot of work to do. I have a lot that I need to make up for, and so I'm just gonna... Okay.
Turn back from this cave. You said
Ok, como eu tive que sair no fim ali, eu vou dar os meus comentários agora. Sim, o jogo ainda não é exatamente como eu pensei que ia ser. Eu não pensei que ia ser realmente igual.
More.
Igual aquela mini parte do portal ali. Aquele mini mapa do portal daquele mod. Sendo que não é o Minish Mirrors, eu não lembro o nome dele. Eu acho que é Level with Me. Mas aí. Eu achei que esse jogo ia ser realmente uma coleção de um monte de outros jogos que não eram só na Source. Nossa! Caraca, então é só uma textura, velho. É só uns mais perto que tem umas mini paredes. Mas isso é impossível de notar de longe, velho. É daqui que eu vi. Aham.
Turn back. Turn back from this cave.
Mano, acabei de perceber que aqui no console fala que o meu nome é Dave. Isso é interessante. Que Dave é o nome do narrador, né, mano? Cara, então esse que é o mapa que eu mais queria explorar quando eu Creep. Então, tipo, as partes que é preta e azul faz parte do 2D Skybox. Então eu não posso realmente andar lá. Mas esses pedaços aqui eu posso. E tipo, eles me lembram muito, mas muito de Container Bridge, o SP Container Bridge. Tipo, é idêntico, tipo, o ambiente que ele dá dessas paredes assim. Deixa eu ver se eu acho o 3D Cyberx. Deve ser mais difícil porque também é preto. Não acho que eu vou conseguir.
It was actually the first game of his that I ever played. This was shortly after I met him at a weekend game jam in Sacramento, where I grew up. I saw him working on this very level, and it was just so different from anything that anyone else was doing. So right away I was like, I have to be friends with this person.
Que triste. Essa
In
aqui não
retrospect, I think
realmente
I
é
was
só
probably a
tudo
bit too
falso
pushy,
aqui.
trying to get his attention. I was over enthusiastic, but he was very gracious about it and very patient with me. And I cooled off eventually.
Aí antes de eu ter saído, eu tinha feito uma teoria que tipo. Esses mapas não foram
At the end of this level,
no
we're
próprio
going to see
narrador
the
não?
puzzle
Tipo,
again.
realmente foi do
And
amigo,
here,
né?
I'll tell you what I think the puzzle means. That was on Coda's mind at the time that he was making it. And the puzzle is a way of closing the door on a previous chapter of his life before moving on to the next one.
Agora eu não fiz de novo, só que eu dou dela. E antes que aquele programa lá, você tá fazendo trem errado?
Okay, this one is tough. It's gonna kinda just spin its own wheels for a few minutes. Hang with it.
Porta. Tá, então todos esses aqui são mapas só, interessante.
See, like, this is it. The whole game. And there's nothing that's particularly interesting about it. You just walk to the end of a hallway. Except, for some reason, Coda gets really fixated on this prison that has all of this modern furniture. And I don't know why, but he decides he needs to revisit this prison. He's gonna start over, use the same assets, turn it into something else. Okay, cool. Here's version 2. There's a bit more to this one, but still it's not really communicating anything. It's kind of just weird for weirdness. So okay, he throws it out and starts over. This time he comes at the prison idea from a different direction.
Cara, como que esse reflexo foi feito, velho? Porque eu não lembro de Cube Math ser tão bem feito assim. Eu achei que, tipo, esse chão era transparente e ele tinha copiado tudo pra baixo.
The game ends with this eerie premonition of what's going to happen next in Coda's life. The solution to social anxiety, to fears of having to perform and having to chase success, the answer for Coda is to withdraw, to hide himself away. Which is what leads to scenarios like the stairs that slowed you down. It becomes harder and harder to access Coda.
Tá, o que eu tava falando era, chama... O mod que eu tava falando chama Draw Me a World, né? Era meio filme não. E talvez eu revisite ele.